Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the author segment of the Book Connection show. We have today Tom McKinley, a self-help author. Tom McKinley is the author of 3 books, Winning the Fight to Be Happy, Make the Right Decisions Early, and his latest book, Passages for Inner Peace. Hi, Tom.
Yeah, thank you for the nice introduction. Very kind of you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am middle-aged, obviously. I'm a professor of British and American literature at the County College of Morris in New Jersey. Aside from that, a lot of my life has been spent overseas. I'm a kind of amateur anthropologist. I lived in England, China, Thailand, and the Philippines for a total of 20 years. I'm fascinated with people. I find people endlessly fascinating. And just one other thing is I work a lot in volunteer work. I worked for Rotary International for charity work for a number of years. I just find it very inspiring work. I'm always keen to sort of help people in this difficult journey we call life.
As I've mentioned, you've written 3 books. Can you tell me a little bit about each one?
Thank you. Yeah. So my first book, which is called Winning the Fight to Be Happy, is written to help people rewire their mind, to have a positive perspective on life. We're often so weighed down by the difficulties of life, and it's easy to become pessimistic, to become cynical. So I wrote this book because I myself had been through an experience of depression, anxiety, and just feeling very negative. And when I climbed out of that, I said, I want to share this with people, not just my own experience, but to present it in a way that helps people to also climb out of feeling that way and to be more positive. My second book, called Make the Right Decisions Early. Make the Right Decisions Early is for teens and college students. And it teaches them, educates them about career choices, majors, colleges, but also having the right perspective on life going into, that period of life, 18 and 19 and 20. And helping them, again, to be more positive about life. And then lastly, my most recent book is Passages for Inner Peace, focuses on creating serenity within people. We live in a very stressful, hard, fast-paced world. And I think what is missing from people's lives is a feeling of peace. So I take verses from the book of Psalms in the Bible and show people how to apply those verses to their lives and to themselves, feel more serene, more peaceful about life.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a connection between all 3 of your books, like wanting to find happiness, wanting to find success while focusing on, like mental health and physical health as well. And then your latest book, Finding Serenity. And I was on your website and I came across something that kind of stuck with me. It was a quote that you had, and you mentioned, because you said that you've struggled with depression on your website. And one thing you said is, one result is that I am now a happy person with an inner reservoir of peace in mind and an outlook on life that is both optimistic and realistic. So what are, just like quickly, like what are some things that readers can find from your, especially I guess maybe your first book specifically, that also have struggled with depression or anxiety?
Sure, thank you. Great question. I appreciate that. And I think one thing I focus on is our attitude towards change, which is, I think for a lot of people, it's a very negative attitude that people have towards change. And what I've realized is change generally is a positive thing, especially if looked at in a wide context. Change is part of life. We can't escape it. And if it's part of life and it has been created as part of life, and it can't be a bad thing. It often seems very uncomfortable at the beginning. But when we look at the changes in our life, for the most part, these are changes that have helped us grow. And life is really about growth. It's not about comfort. Of course, we like comfort, and I like comfort.
Yeah.
But inevitably, life seems to be constantly telling us that this is a process of growth. It's not a process of comfort. And you can look it's nice to look for pockets of comfort at the end of the day, watching a movie or a nice meal. Generally, change is part of this growth life, the spirit of growth in life. And so we have to get used to accepting it and looking positively at it.
Mhm.
And that's one thing I definitely try to communicate to my readers is just when life throws changes at you, embrace them. When there's challenges, embrace them. There's better things at the end, of that. And if you have that trust and that belief that things are getting better as a result of change, you will look
Mhm.
more positively at change.
Yeah, I feel like definitely it's so much easier to just stay in your comfort zone. And yeah, like you said, like people just don't embrace change. And I feel like then either people get stuck or they decide to, change how they feel about change. And that
Yes.
also can be looking for outside resources such as your books.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, thank you. I mean, and that's again, a lot of this was from personal experience, but also, again, from observing, what I see in other people. And
Mhm.
comfort zones are nice, but unfortunately, life doesn't want us to stay in them for very long.
No,
and if,
not at
and
all.
if we don't leave them voluntarily, we're kicked out of them, and then we
Yeah.
feel very miserable about it. One quote from my book is change is written into the DNA of life. So it is part of life, it inextricably part of life. And it's our job to
Yeah.
really deal with it as best we can. And why not
Yeah.
view it positively? Because there's
Yeah.
not much
I
use in
agree.
looking negatively at anything.
Yeah, I agree. So you've written three books. What was
Hmm.
your writing experience like, or how long did it take you to write, I guess, like each book or relatively each book?
Cool. Yes, I mean, my first book took exactly 9 months,
Oh,
and it was
wow.
a sort of like gestation period. Um,
Yeah.
9 months from starting the book to the final proof, my final proofreading after somebody proofread it for me. And what I do remember was the big shock being that after writing, there is this period called rewriting, which I
Yeah.
didn't anticipate. Yeah, I thought I'll write, I'll copy edit, and then I'll get someone to
Yeah.
proofread. So there was this big section called rewriting, but I'm very glad I did it. So that took 9 months. My second book took 6 months. I had it all mapped out. So it was just sort of an outline. I followed the outline. My third book, Passages for Inner Peace, that was a surprise. I did not plan on writing a third book. And when COVID struck in March 2020, I suddenly had some extra time on my hands.
Yeah.
And so I just started casually writing a few blog articles for my blog. And then something in me, there was this amazing momentum in me that just kept me writing new things. And I said, I'm writing blog article after, maybe I could turn this into a book. And within
Yeah.
3 months, it was done.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it was.
Awesome.
There was something coming, some inspiration coming in. It was
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Well, I know you talked about like rewriting. So what was your favorite part about writing?
My favorite part is definitely what I try to do with my books because they're not novels where everything's very linear. There is
Yeah.
some linearity to them in the sense that it's helping people, grow their understanding and in being more positive, looking at the world in a better way, getting better about themselves. But my
Hmm.
favorite part of writing, because I don't have characters in my books, plots, so to speak, but it's being able to say something in a concise and memorable way that people can remember.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so again, one thing I say is anxiety is a master of deception, and I just find that's a very memorable line. I think because when people do feel anxiety, cause them to take actions which they don't want to, or can cause inaction. And I think they need to remember anxiety deceives you into making decisions you don't want to make, or being afraid of things that you should not be afraid of. And so
Hmm.
when I can sort of encapsulate something in a very compact, nice phrase that sticks in the mind, that's what I
Yeah.
find particularly exciting in my writing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like there's just some phrases that just stay with you. And yeah, it's nice to be able to be the source of that for some
I try my
people.
best, Sometimes again with writing, writing generally is hard work. You have to sit down with
Yeah.
your pen or your computer and bang it out. But whether you're in the shower or exercising or walking, sometimes boom, something just comes to you.
What's up?
And then of course it might not be perfect. You may have to edit it a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's nice. But you never know when that some lightning bolts going to enter
Yeah.
into the mind. That's again what's so exciting about it.
Yeah. So when something comes to you, are you able to like write it down like immediately? Or for me, like if I think of something, I just like jot it in my notes in my phone.
Yeah,
And I'm like, okay, I got it. It's there.
good idea. Yeah, because what I learned very early when I started writing was if something good comes to me, something I think is good, probably not going to remember it unless I write it down. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, often it comes to me while I'm walking.
Yeah.
And I used to walk to work, and I'd say, "Oh well, I'll type that down when I get to the office." And of course, by the time I got to the office, it had evaporated. So I'll write it. I would write it on my phone, and I type it into my phone into the notes section on the phone. And if it was particularly long, I would speak it while
Oh,
I was
yeah.
walking. So
That's
I have
awesome.
these. Yeah, sorry. I have these recordings, where some idea I had while I was walking to work, and I'm speaking into my phone. And then when I listen to it later, I can hear the sounds of vehicles and
Yeah.
people walking past.
Yeah.
But I just found if I don't write it down, I won't remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to get it down on paper,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Oh, especially with my memory.
Yeah. So what are some like difficult things you found with writing? Like, have you encountered any like roadblocks, or it seems like you've been able to crank out like books like pretty fast. Like some authors, it takes like a while, like even years to complete manuscripts.
Yes, I mean, I think when one writes fiction, I think maybe it's harder because
Yeah.
they have to allow their characters to sort of grow along with them. And I guess
Yeah.
I'm in a situation where I don't have characters, and but I think the hardest part was always the outline, getting an outline ready, and just sort of the way that I think was always get the outline and then move on to the writing. If you wait to get the perfect outline, you will never start writing. And what I learned was, get a rough outline and then see where the writing takes you.
Hmm.
Then see the journey because when you start writing, you're on a journey
Hmm.
and see where that takes you. And you don't have to stick to that outline. And and actually sticking to an outline can be kind of boring. Writing should there should be some fun, despite the strain of it. Writing should have some fun in it. And so yeah, I think initially it was always deciding, okay, do I have enough to really start?
Hmm.
Or do I have an outline that's solid enough? But
Hmm.
if there was too much rigidity, then it wouldn't work. Just
Yeah.
wouldn't go very well.
Yeah. Have you had a favorite book that you've written?
As far as the writing process, I think the first book I wrote there were just seemed to be sort of constant revelations along the way while I was writing it over that 9-month period, winning the fight to be happy. And I'd sort of stumble upon a really good quote from a philosopher or,
Hmm.
an inventor or something. And I'd say, wait, I can include that. I can get that into my book. And I did. There was a sort of wide scope to the book in that sense, and so I guess that was the writing process of that was the most raw experience
Yeah.
because it was my first time writing. And there
Oh,
was a
yeah.
lot of self-discovery along the way.
Mhm.
I suppose. On the other hand, the most recent book there was a lot of, I guess, inspiration in the most recent one. So it was a much easier writing process. It just sort of
Mhm.
came out almost physically, as if I write by hand. I know it sounds old-fashioned, but what I found,
Fashion.
and
That's awesome.
I don't know if this anticipates one of the other questions, but what I found was and I often recommend this to other writers, is find what's physically comfortable for you when you're
Oh,
writing. I think a lot of people they wait for these ideal writing conditions to exist, and that rarely happens.
mhm.
But what I found was waking up an hour before work, sitting up in my bed with a notebook and a pen, and that's how I would write. And I'd require myself to write about 500 words a day. That
Mhm.
was my rule. Sometimes I would go over that. Sometimes my brain would bleed just trying to get 300 words,
Mhm.
but I would aim for 500. But the main thing was that because I cannot type and think at the same time.
Mhm.
except maybe in emails. But otherwise, and so for other people, it's different. For some people, they work better in the evening and they
Yeah.
come home from work, they have a cup of tea and they
Mhm.
write for an hour. Some people, I've heard of people who write in their car at lunchtime. They leave the office, they sit in their car for an hour, they eat their sandwich and they write. It's important to find the mode that works for you.
Mhm.
And that's what worked for me, was just wake up in the morning, everything's quiet. I'm not, nothing's going on. I'm still in bed, I'm warm, I'm comfortable, and I just start writing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, you got to find like what works for you. Yeah, it's interesting talking with other authors and seeing, yeah, like what their like little routine is of writing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you have to do like what works for you. And yeah, I know like you will have those days where you don't get as much out, but I mean, it's all about consistency, right?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think if 500 words a day, if one aims for that, there's days where you will go well over them. It
Hmm.
was nice. I'd write maybe 700, maybe 1,000, and I'd say, well, this is a good morning's work. And then I felt really good for the day, for my work day.
Hmm.
I did not write on Sundays. On Sundays, I simply typed up everything I'd written the 6 days
Oh yeah.
before. But yes, it's important, I think, to have a sort of basic sort of modus operandi,
Hmm.
so for how one works, because there has to be some discipline involved in the process.
Oh yeah.
I think Jack London, the guy who wrote White Fang, The Call of the Wild, he said, "You can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club." And so I think if people just wait, oh, I'm just going to let myself be inspired, it doesn't tend to happen, or it happens so irregularly that it
Yeah.
doesn't help one's writing process.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Have you like connected with any other authors that have like a similar routine as you, or have you talked to any like writers that you can, like have, different routines as you or
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, a lot of people do prefer the morning,
Mhm.
from what I found, because it's just before the whole onslaught of the
Yeah.
day. And at least that's one time that generally people can segregate. Again, it's like exercise. Some people prefer the early morning, some people prefer the evening, and it tends to be one or the other. Again, with those exceptions, I think with the alterations to people's schedules since COVID, which is now approaching 3 years, people have discovered if they're working from home, they're able to maybe take 2 hours and do some writing at home in the
Mhm.
middle of the day, because COVID has just transformed, people's regular modes of working.
Yeah.
But it's still definitely, I would say, more than 50% prefer the morning, because I guess it's waking up with that clear head and without all the physical exhaustion from the day.
Yeah, being drained from the whole day. I feel like that would just be like the least thing I'd want to do is like
Same
write
for me. Same
yeah,
for me.
get it out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's great to go to work and say, okay, I've got this massive thing done.
Yeah.
One thing you've already accomplished. It's
Yeah.
like that admiral who gave the speech saying, make your bed in the morning, because at least it's one thing you've done that
Oh
day.
yeah. Yeah, I've
And
heard that too. Have you gotten any like nice feedback from your books or any comments or reviews from readers that you've
yes,
liked?
yeah, I've been very blessed. I mean, I'll read one because I wrote it down. It was
Okay.
the one from Amazon on my first book, Winning the Fight to Be Happy. And they said my book helped them to have a new way of thinking. And this was exactly what I had aimed for the book to do. This,
Mm-hmm.
it was a new positive way of thinking. Again, a sort of rewiring of the way one approaches life and the problems of life. And so just reading that was extremely gratifying, because it captured what I was really trying to do. And so happy to hear that. And another one was from my third book, Passages for Inner Peace. And they said, it's a wonderful book to pick up daily. And again, what I was striving for with Passages for Inner Peace was to write a book that people would pick up daily and look at, even if it was just to look at one page, and they could pick it up anywhere. They could just dip into it. And if they can find some kernel, some nugget that helps them approach that day or feel more peaceful about life, that's what I was aiming for. I always say you don't need to read my books cover to cover in a linear way. You can pick them up at any on any page, and
Mhm.
hopefully find something there that's helpful. Um, I like the fact that most of my books can fit into somebody's suit jacket pocket. They can fit into a handbag.
Oh,
They're very
yeah.
portable. And again, the idea is just if you have a spare moment, open it up, find
Yeah.
something that helps you through your day. And that's the way I approach writing them, is to make sure that there's nuggets in there that people can access, even with limited time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love like self-help, like motivational books, and I think that's just like such like a great, I guess, genre. And yeah, it's so nice like going to a book like your book and just like yeah, like highlight, I don't know how you feel about like highlighting in a book, but like
Yeah. Oh
highlighting,
gosh.
like in a book. Yeah, like you said, just like finding a little, like you don't have to read it front to back, which I like. So you can just like find little,
Yeah.
yeah, little passages that you like that can just like get you through the day. Like that must be like so fulfilling knowing that like readers can like find something like in your book that can inspire them or push them or like motivate them.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, when I read those, I was just smiling, beaming, reading that
Oh
because I
yeah.
said, A, they liked it. B, they bought it, which is nice.
Huh.
And then C, because it was on Amazon. And then C, it was just what I had really strived to do was what they had picked up on, was what,
Mhm.
my objective, my goal, my aim with writing
Yeah.
it was what they had seized upon as being valuable.
Mhm.
So that was extremely just again gratifying to see.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so we've talked about your readers. What about writers? So is there like any advice you would give to, I guess, a first time writer, someone who's writing their first book?
Yes, I mean I would definitely say have an outline. It doesn't need to be extremely detailed, but sort of know in general where you're going with the book and what you want to accomplish. The old saying, begin with the end in mind. Sort of put together that elevator pitch of your book before you start writing. So then
Hmm.
you know, then you can always come back to that as a sort of mission statement or something. But it's nice to have that thesis statement. I'm a professor,
Yeah.
so I talk a lot about thesis statements. But it's nice to be able to come back to that sort of nucleus, what the book is about. And if
Hmm.
ever, anytime you feel you're getting off track or you're feeling uninspired or unmotivated, it's like, what am I doing? Just go back to that. So have an elevator pitch, have an
Hmm.
outline, and then third is write every day.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of execution side of writing. And write every, you can take Sundays off. Otherwise, keep oneself to that discipline, to that regimen. And after a few months, you will have a book.
Yeah.
At least after a few months, you'll have a substantial amount of words there that you can then rewrite.
Yeah, that's good advice. I feel like even just like sitting down and making, you have to prioritize writing, if you want
Mm.
to, have a book. So yeah, I think finding the time is a good piece of advice. And because you never know like what you can create in that given amount of time too. And like you said, writing every day is a really, really good one.
I mean, it helps because if I had not had that philosophy, I would never have finished the book. I would have
Yeah.
just, waited for nice little things to come into my head,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't have a book. It
Hmm.
would have never happened.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We can do a lot when we push ourselves. And
Oh yeah.
I think one other thing, sort of just as an addendum to that, is what I call the 5 minute push. I don't think I came up with that myself, but when you don't want to do something, whether it's exercise or writing, say, I'm just going to sit down and do it for 5 minutes, then I'm done. And generally,
Yeah.
what happens is once you start, the momentum kicks in.
You don't want to
But it's all
stop.
about, yeah, but it's all about, and just so the 5 minutes sort of tricks your mind and saying, okay, it's just going to be 5 minutes, then I'm done. And then before you know it, it's 15, 20, 30 minutes. And
Yeah.
you've finished your exercise or you've finished your writing, activity for the day, your
Yeah.
allotment. Yeah.
That's such a good piece of advice. Yeah. Just like set like 5 minutes on a timer and be like, oh, it went off. And then you can just keep going.
Yeah. Then you're in it and you're in the flow, and so much of
Yeah.
writing is about flow.
Yeah. Well, I think we're a little over, but I really am curious if you have a little bit more time
Sure. Yeah. I
about,
got time.
yeah, about your second book. So I feel like this book would have been making the right decision. What is it? Making the right
Make the right
decisions.
decisions early. Yeah.
Early. Yeah. I feel like this would have been like such a good book for me. Like in college, like I feel like so many people like need that. So can you, I guess, tell a little bit more about the inspiration for your second book?
It was an interesting book to write. And I think it was because I was looking back on my experience and also at other people's experiences. And I realized that and I don't want to criticize the education system here, but I think that there's often not the proper guidance given as to, again, seeing what the sort of end result we want from our studies. And, excuse me, people are, I think, encouraged to study subjects which don't lead to a job or don't lead to a career. And what I was trying to express in this book is you have to sort of start from the end and work back. If you want to be earning a certain amount of money or be in a certain type of job, have a certain lifestyle, working your way back, you need to be studying the right things and entering the right fields. And that means you need to be choosing the right majors, choosing the colleges that are good for those majors.
Right.
So it was, again, helping people to sort of, when they graduate from college, to not have a diploma in their hand and say, oh gosh, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do now? And just be sort of, it's like being hit in the face with a shovel and saying, okay, I've got this wonderful degree, but what do I do with it? And so it was sort of working one's way back to, say, being 16 or 17 and making the right decisions at that point, rather than being 23 or 22 and saying, oh, I need to start making the right decisions now. And at 16 and 17, the world is just, there's this amazing landscape, this fertile landscape in front of us of what we can do with our lives. We live in America. We have so many choices. We have so access to so many things. It's a great time.
Overwhelming.
And that's overwhelming as well. And sometimes there is too much choice.
Yeah.
And we have, what's the phrase? We have freedom of choice, but we don't have freedom from choice. Meaning there's just so much in front of us. But so this was helping people maybe narrow it down and say, okay, well, if you want to have a certain lifestyle, this is what you start with, when you're 16, 17, 18. And also, so that was the main thing, is I want people to graduate from college feeling, okay, well, I've done the right things for what I want to and for what the lifestyle I want to have.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah, I definitely needed that book after college. So I feel like I would have loved to have that like right out of college. I think that would have been a great
so
book.
So would I. but thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were a professor too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually, I began my career as a professor when I was 23. I finished my master's degree. I was studying in England. I got a master's. And then I got an opportunity to go to China and teach at a university in China. So I was working with the British Council. So that's what I did. So I sat in the year 2000, I found myself on a plane to China. And this was before China became very kind of popular, the place to go. It was a real adventure because I knew so little about it. The internet wasn't what it is now. So there wasn't very much to know. So there wasn't very much to be able to find out unless you went there. So I began there, taught in China for a few years. I taught in Thailand for a few years. And then I went into publishing, which is why I ended up working in book publishing. And then finally I said, it would be nice to go back to teaching. That was my first love. And so now I teach at a university in New Jersey. And I teach literature, which is what my major was. And
oh, that's awesome. Well, so you've been all over the world.
It's been an interesting, and I never expected that. When I was 17, the only plan I think I ever had was seeing England and maybe Italy, to see some of the family roots, mother's side. And that was about it. I didn't see myself going to the Far East. I mean, it didn't, but one thing leads to another, and I said at the beginning, I find people endlessly fascinating. And when I was studying for my master's in England, in London, I met people from China and Japan and Singapore, and it was so interesting. And I just said, I'm very people driven, very motivated by people and learning about different cultures. So that engendered in me, a desire to go even farther than Europe and see more different things.
Well, it's nice to see that you also embrace change by making that move, kind of coming full circle from what we talked about in the
Yes.
beginning.
Yeah, it was a radical change. And again,
Yeah.
life has its little changes, but it has its radical changes,
Yeah.
and a lot in between.
Yeah. Well, lastly, I just wanted to see maybe like what you're working on now, if you're currently working on maybe a fourth book.
This is a year of percolating. Let me say, it's a year of percolating. I didn't, like I said, I didn't plan to write a third book. So, and that just again came to me. So I've said I'll never rule it out, writing
Mhm.
another book. And so what I said was definitely this year is a year of getting ideas, observing, taking notes, reading. I'm an avid reader. I just got the biography of Benjamin Franklin. So I think that'll be interesting. So I
Oh,
like to read biographies, fiction, all self-help, philosophy, religion, all the. So it's a year of accumulating. It's a year of research, but it's
nice.
also a year of some marketing. So being asked to give some talks is nice. When you write self-help books, if they're well received, people will ask you to give talks. I've
Hmm.
given talks to businesses, departments of businesses. I was a speaker at a graduation.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so things like that. So it's sort of a year of a little bit of marketing and some research. Again, like I said, I don't rule it out. You never know when you're going to get that idea to
Yeah,
write something.
exactly. That's true. Okay, so where can readers find you? Do you have a website?
I have my website. It's just tommckinley.com. I'm also on Amazon, so all of my books are on Amazon. Thanks to the company, my publisher.
Mhm.
They took care of everything. So yeah, I'm on Amazon, all three books. It's great. These days people can say just type it in and then they can
Yeah.
order the book. They can have it within 24 hours. It's a great
Mhm.
age to be writing and publishing books. Lucky.
Um, Well, thank you so much. Thank you for taking your
Thank
time
you,
and
Emma.
joining us today. And it was a pleasure talking with you and
Yeah,
meeting
my
you.
pleasure. Yeah, same here. Absolutely. Thanks for your questions and giving me an opportunity to talk about something I love doing. So thank
Yeah,
you
of
very
course.
much.
Well, thank you very much.